Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
God bless America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above.
All right, 6 minutes after 9 o'clock, nice looking Thursday, and it's time for Veterans News with Hank Whittier. Good morning, Hank.
I thought you were going to say it was a nice looking couple of guests you have there. But you didn't say that, Larry.
I could do it. You want to rewind the tape? We can do it again.
Yeah, do it again. Yeah, I told you a couple of weeks ago, this is the 100th anniversary of God Bless America by Irving Berlin. Interesting little side note. I like to play it all the time. This morning, by the way, good morning, everybody. Thank you for your service. We're going to talk about the election a little bit coming up, not anything political, but there are a lot of amendment and constitutional amendments on the ballot this year. Some of them are very confusing. Some of them you need to know about. And I'll repeat what we were talking about earlier. It's going to be a very, very long ballot this year. And a lot of amendments, and I would suggest, like the supervisor elections is, you may want to consider voting by mail this year, and you can get a hold of the supervisor elections office. Judge Lant is here with us today to explain the amendments, and the judge and I were talking about you definitely want to keep that open as an option about voting by mail, because if you run into people who really aren't familiar with their ballot, it's going to be a delay this year. There's no doubt about it. So give Wesley Wilcox a call down there, and he'll tell you how to do that. And let me just introduce Jinky's here with us today, of course, from Caliber. We have an announcement about the pizza place who did a nice job for us. Marco's Pizza did a fundraising for us and raised us some money. Didn't ask us to do anything, but just talk about it a little bit. And they came up with a new promotion for veterans, which you're going to talk about, Jinky, since it's on your phone.
No, you're better saying it than I do.
All right. So Marco's Pizza, which is, I don't know how many locations they have, but the one I know about is right across from the hospital over here on State Road 200 next to Aspen Dental. And they'll give 25% off the total order if you're a veteran or active military person. You just have to show them some proof of that. So, and that's on what days are
Friday, Saturday.
Fridays.
Thursday, Fridays.
Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays. So you show them that you're a veteran and some military type ID, and you get 25% off your entire order. So that's a good deal.
So you better go there.
I'll be eating a lot of pizza. Which I do already. Let me just get serious, because we're going to get into these amendments, and I read through some of them, and some of them are very confusing. And then I guess this morning a judge took one of them off. I guess you guys were talking about it, but I have Judge Lant, and I've known Judge Lant for many, many years. He's done this a number of times for us, come in and explain these constitutional amendments. And I really appreciate him. He's been a friend of the veteran community and a friend of mine for many, many years. So we appreciate his service to the community. And this is the kind of thing that he steps up and does all the time on his own time. So we appreciate it, guy. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is that I've been talking to a lot of people. A lot of people their position on these things is, well, I don't understand them, so I just don't vote. I just skip them all. And this is they're amending our Constitution. And so everyone needs to pay some attention to these things, because once they're in the Constitution, they're there. Or if it's something that you really like, you don't know if you don't look at it, but you need to really review these and vote on these constitutional amendments. It takes a 60% supermajority to put them into the Constitution. And some of them are complicated, and they do a lot of different things, and we'll talk about those. But I really want to urge everybody to read them, do some research. We'll try to give you a little bit of an idea what they're about, and vote. Vote yes or vote no, whichever you think is the best on each one. But these are really important. This is not the kind of thing you should go in and say, well, I didn't bother, so I'm just not going to vote at all, because these things are going to run our lives and our children's lives.
Well, I'll remind everybody, too, that August 28th is the primary. A lot of people don't vote in the primaries, but a lot that makes a difference, because if your candidate doesn't get enough votes, they're not going to be there for the general election. So you need to keep that in mind and turn out and make sure that this primary that you do vote, that's August the 28th. And as I say, there's other ways to do that besides waiting for that date, but call the supervisor elections and they'll fill you in on those other alternatives. So, Judge, I'm going to leave it up to you to kind of, I know how you want to start with right through and go.
All right.
Yeah.
Order. Well, there are, up until yesterday, there were 13 proposed amendments to the Constitution. And as they were discussing earlier, now there's 12. The 13th was about dog racing. And they've removed it from a ballot. A judge in Tallahassee did because he determined that the description was too complicated and didn't properly describe everything that one was going to do. The first 5 amendments are proposed by the legislature, and they have put these on the ballot. And then there are a bunch that were put on by what we call the Constitutional Revisions Committee. Every 20 years under the Constitution, there's a group that gets together appointed by the governor and various other people, and they review the Constitution, and then they make recommendations on changes that should happen to the Constitution. And then they have a voting process, and they put the ones that pass go on, and those they were 6 through 13. Now they're 6 through 11 or 12. But the first 5 are proposed by the legislature. The first one is an increase in homestead property tax exemption. And I think we're all familiar with the tax exemptions that we have now. You get there's a $25,000 exemption against all taxes. Then there's another 25 that some people qualify for. And there's a number of other small ones for veterans and things like that. This would be a new homestead exemption. And what it would do, if your home is worth more than or assessed for more than $125,000, it would give you an extra $25,000. So you'd be taxed on 100 instead of 125, or you would be taxed on 150 if your house was appraised there at 175. So it doesn't affect anybody whose home is worth less than $100,000, pursuant to what the property assessor sets your value at, but it would reduce the taxes for people whose homes are more than $100,000. And so that's a proposal by the legislature. The primary effect of that would be that it would have a reduction in the amount of tax dollars that your local county would have, because that's how they fund their government. So if you want your taxes to be reduced and you have a home that's worth more than $100,000, then you would vote for that. If you don't think that we need another reduction in value and corresponding reduction in the amount of taxes that the county has to work with, then you would vote against that. So that's, for the most part, that's a fairly simple one. Either you want to increase that deduction or you don't. The second one that's on the ballot is also has to do with limitations on property tax assessments. There's in 2008, when the economy was really bad, a number of things were done to as the run-up was coming on and people's values were just climbing like crazy. In 2008, they did some stuff to cap how much your property can be valued at each year. And this limitation, that they're looking really to extend that limitation, not as it relates to your home, but as it relates to non-homestead property, which is pretty much most kinds of real property that no one's living in. Commercial property, investment property. If you have 2 homes, the one that you're not carrying your exemption on would be covered by this as well. This would also maintain, there's a $25,000 exemption for tangible property, which is personal property and things that are taxed. And those limitations and those reductions are scheduled to sunset in 2019. And so beginning next year, those properties, the values would be able to rise again, and that $25,000 exemption for tangible property would come off, and that would result in higher taxes for people with non-homestead property, higher taxes for people who have the kind of personal property that's taxed. That could include furniture and whatnot. If you have a vacation home, it can include furniture and things that are in your place of business. And so this second article, the primary thing that it does is extend those exemptions and those caps on increase in value that we've had in place since 2008.
Larry, do you want to take a break and do a commercial and pay for the lights and all of that good stuff?
I will do that.
Thank you, buddy.
We'll take a little break. Real quickly, I wanted to mention that Veterans News is brought to you by Bob Wine's Community Gardens and Nursery at 2610 Southeast 38th Street here in Ocala. When it comes to landscaping, Bob Wines has what you need, everything from small plants to large trees, mulch, fertilizer, and so much more. Bob Wines will even deliver, plant, and guarantee their trees. Bob Wines Community Gardens and Nursery has been keeping you blooming since 1952. Their phone number is 629-5766. And remember, Bob Wines offers a 10% discount to veterans. And also, Hires Baxley sponsors the Veterans News program, and they've been doing this for a long time. Hires Baxley has had generations of families honor them with their trust and confidence. They believe it's because for the last 128 years, their team of caring professionals have established a reputation of serving families with excellence and compassion. Hires Baxley currently partners with the Boy Scouts of America Troop Number 72 to properly dispose of decommissioned American flags. They're also a drop-off location for the program Cell Phones for Soldiers, helping to provide minutes that matter and helping heroes home. Hires Baxley is located at 910 East Silver Springs Boulevard here in Ocala. If you have any questions, their phone number is 629-7171, or you can go to their website, hiresbaxley.com. That's hires-baxley.com. And that's all the advertisements. Hank, back to you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Judge, I know we're pressed for time a little bit. Let me just give you the phone number down there at the Supervisor Elections Office, because we've talked a lot about that. You may want to give them a call and ask them about how to get a mail-in ballot, all that good stuff. So, of course, it's area code 352-620-3290. And give them a call, and I'm sure they'll be glad to explain all that to you. Judge, you want to pick up where you left off?
Sure. So the next proposed amendment is titled Voters' Control of Gambling in Florida. Once again, this is one that's been put on by the legislature. And basically what this amendment would do would require that in order to pass casino gambling, in addition to having to get through the legislature, it would have to pass the people. It would have to be approved by the Florida voters, which means that it would go on a ballot, and there would be an election to determine whether or not a majority of the people want to have casino gambling. Really, it would be casino gambling expanding, since we already have casino gambling, because this would not have any effect on federal law. And so it would not have any effect on the casinos that are currently being run on Indian reservations. It also would not have any effect on the casino boats and ships where you can go on and get on a boat and they go out into the ocean and cruise around and you can gamble. And then you have to quit gambling before you come back. My understanding is it also would not have an effect on the poker rooms that we currently have. It wouldn't have an effect on any of the gambling that we currently have, including what highlight the dogs, although that's subject of a different one, and horses, and the gambling that you're allowed to do at tracks in addition to the races that are happening that day at the track.
Can I mention, and I don't know if you can give a legal opinion or not, tell me, but can you clarify those gambling rooms for me? There seems to be a lot of confusion about them, because periodically you see that one of them gets raided and people are arrested, and yet I see them all over the place, and sometimes I've seen them in some other counties close to where the sheriff's departments are located.
Those are the internet cafes.
Internet cafes, yeah.
Yeah. Internet cafes are allowed if you're not actually winning money.
Okay.
But what happens in many of the ones that get busted is they're calling it something else, but you're really playing for
money.
winning money.
Mm-hmm.
And some counties are much stricter on that than others. Marion County, I think, is probably one of the strictest from the standpoint of not allowing that to go on when it's not authorized by the statute. I think there are other counties where maybe they've got other things to be worried about, or maybe they just, they turn a little bit more of a blind eye to it. But we're pretty strict here about making sure that people follow the law. But those internet cafes, it's video game based. I've never been in one, so I can't tell you exactly how they work. But ultimately, what happens is if they have a way that when you win, you can turn your winnings into money.
Mm-hmm, that's illegal.
That's illegal because it's gambling that's not authorized.
Yeah. And that's what triggered it. I was in another county and happened to see a couple of them, and they were pretty blatantly operated. And it's okay with me if that's what people want to do, and that okay with that county official. But it's I know Marion County has clamped down pretty severely on those.
Yeah, we try to keep that from happening. So this voter gambling in Florida, if you vote for this amendment, what you're voting for is in order to have more casino gambling in Florida, in addition to having to be passed and get through the legislature, it would then have to be approved by the people on a vote. And the whole gambling thing, Hank, is it's getting really complicated now because now they've ruled at the federal level that you can gamble on sports, college.
Correct.
And so I'm not sure exactly if they're going to try to do that in the tracks, the horse tracks, dog tracks, and frontons. And of course, we now have poker. But in order to run a poker game, you have to have some type of a gambling license, which is why they're mostly at racetracks and the high life frontons and things like that. So anyway, that's what that Third Amendment would do. The fourth one that is proposed, which also comes out of the legislature, is a voting restoration amendment. And what this would do is it would automatically restore voting rights of Floridians with felony convictions after they had completed all the terms of their sentence. So if you were convicted of a felony and you were placed both in jail and then you had probation or parole after, when you had completely concluded your probation or your parole and completely paid your debt, then your voting rights would automatically be reinstated. That would not apply to people who are either convicted of murder or certain sexual offenses. They would continue to be barred from voting, although they would still have the opportunity to have their rights restored by having the cabinet and the governor come in and hear a petition to have your voting rights restored. They could be restored in that manner. But people who are convicted of any other type of felony would have their voting rights automatically restored. And so that would go from, for example, you could be convicted of a third-degree felony theft where you might have stolen more than $300 worth of stuff. You automatically, at this point, you lose your rights if you're adjudicated guilty and you can't get them back other than this petition process. But that would carry all the way up to grand theft and violent crimes as well. So if you believe that people that have completed their sentence and done everything they were sentenced to do should be able to vote, then you would vote for this one. And if you think that felons should not be able to vote, then you'd vote against it. This one is maybe one of the more clear and concise amendments on the ballot. It's pretty much does only one thing. And so it's a little bit easier to figure out what's happening. The next one, which is the last amendment that's been put on the ballot by the legislature would require a supermajority vote to impose, authorize, or raise state taxes or fees. This would prohibit the legislature from raising taxes, imposing new taxes, authorizing a tax or a fee, unless it was passed by 2/3 vote of each the House and the Senate. And the bill that was passed could not include anything other than that increase in the tax. And so it attempts to do, at least as I understand it, it attempts to do two things. Number one, obviously, it makes it much more difficult to raise taxes because you got to have a 2/3 vote in the state House and a 2/3 vote in the state Senate. I don't remember when the last time that happened was. And the other thing that it does is it would keep the legislatures from adding riders to a tax bill to try to make it more popular, maybe with some people that would maybe be voting for the other part of that bill. Mm-hmm. A lot of those bills contain a whole lot of different stuff. So this one would make it harder to raise taxes. And it would require that when senators and members of the House were voting on a tax, it would be clear that that's the only thing they're voting on is that increase in the taxes.
Okay, so a yes vote there would sort of limit the legislature from raising taxes unless they had that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Very
make
good.
it difficult. Make it more difficult to raise taxes. So if you like that, you vote for that one. If you think that the legislature needs to operate on a system of majority rules rather than the supermajority, then you'd vote against that one.
Larry, do we have enough time? What do you want to?
Yeah, you got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. You got. Yeah, you want to do one more?
One more.
Yeah.
What happens there now? So those are the 5 that were put on by the legislature. The rest of these are constitutional revisions that have been recommended by the Constitutional Revision Committee. They've done a lot of work. It's a large group of people. They get together, they work real hard, and they make recommendations that they think will improve life and liberty in the state of Florida. The first one they put on the ballot, which is number 6, be number 6 on your ballot, is an amendment that deals with the rights of crime victims. It creates a constitutional rights for victim of crime. It requires the court to facilitate the victim's rights. It authorizes victims to enforce their rights through criminal and juvenile justice process. It requires judges and hearing officers to independently interpret statutes and rules rather than deferring to the government agency's interpretation. It raises the mandatory retirement age of state justices and judges from 70 to 75, and it deletes the authorization to complete a judicial term if 1/2 of the term has been served by retirement age. This
a little confusing.
A little confusing to say the least. The first part of this, maybe we can get through that before we got to go. Larry's giving me the high sign over there. Tries to create a right for victims of crimes to be able to get their pound of flesh in some instances, money damages in other instances. I really don't know what they're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah. It's ambiguous reading through it to me.
And
really
right
what
now,
the goal is here.
Right now, judges have the right to order restitution. What they can't do is restitution is to replace monetary damages that have occurred. They can't award pain and suffering type damages in a criminal case. That may be some of what they're looking for here. Victims' rights also come up a lot in domestic abuse type cases, right, where the victims have.
I think that was our hint. I think. All right. So listen, here's what's going to happen, because again, as the judge said, these are very important for you to understand. Very important that you vote on these things. So we're going to come back. There's going to be a short break and someone else is coming on for 10 minutes or so. And then we'll come back and try to finish them up. And hopefully that will inform all you good folks out there about what's happening in this election.
Very good.
I appreciate it.
And we will be back. We have a 10-minute infomercial for hearing aids, and we'll do that in just a little bit. And we'll be right back after that with Veterans News, continuing the discussion of the 12 amendments that will be proposed for us voters to decide on. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Here is your 1-minute news brief. Monroe Regional Medical Center is now called Florida Hospital Ocala. A Florida judge ruled yesterday that a proposed constitutional amendment to prohibit betting on greyhound racing is misleading and defective and will not appear on the November ballot. The Florida Highway Patrol is reporting that the driver of a southbound semi-tractor trailer died from injuries sustained yesterday when his truck jackknifed, fell on its side, and caught fire at the County Road 326 exit of I-75. A judge has dismissed a lawsuit which claimed police did not do enough to stop a gunman responsible for the massacre at the Pulse nightclub in June of 2016. 5 Democratic candidates for Florida governor are having their final debate this evening, and Cirque du Soleil's latest production debuted last night in Orlando. The show is called Crystal and introduces ice skating into their signature aerial and acrobatics choreography. And that is your news brief from The Source.
Hey, did you know the Ocala Community Credit Union started in 1953 and it's a 5-star credit union? They serve Ocala, Bellevue, Silver Springs, Anthony, and Denellen. Plus is located right here on 36th Avenue next to the Army Reserve. Ocala Community Credit Union is here for your mortgage needs and even your back-to-school loans. Give them a try. Call them 352-629-7596. Ocala Community Credit Union, federally insured by the NCUA and Equal Housing Opportunity Lender.
Have you ever looked at a homeless person and wondered what it's like to walk in their shoes? I'm Carla with Interfaith, and we're hosting a 1-mile walk to benefit our homeless shelter and raise awareness for our homeless friends. This is a walk that will change you for good. To learn more, visit our Facebook page, Walk a Mile in My Shoes 2018, or the Interfaith website at iesmarion.org. Take a walk with me on September 1st. The person you will impact the most is you.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 27 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Thursday morning. I at my age, Robin, I'm actually taking some classes online. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I just thought I would do it. One of the things when we do talk, when we have conversations on this talk show with people who are talking about education, it is a mystery to me how, because our children are all grown and it's been a long time since I had to really concern myself with what's going on in the schools. But it seems like there's so many choices now, right? You have the at-home studies. You got homeschooling, which once upon a time, that was very few people that did that. Now a lot of people do that, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things is you hear about, Common Core. You hear people who are against it, people who are for it. Yeah, I don't know how the parents figure it out, right? I think sometimes that maybe the best thing to do, if I was in their shoes, would be to do the at-home schooling, maybe partially or something, in addition to, as a supplement. It makes sense, because then you could help. You could be there. You could sort of learn what the kids are learning and how they're learning.
Yeah.
I'm Amar Kumar, am I saying her name right, Robin? And Amanda Ebel are on the phone. They're talking about a new study that examines how online schools are changing education. And let me say good morning to our guests. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for being on the air with us.
Sure. Good morning, Larry.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, and Amar, did I say your name wrong, or how did I do?
You've got it.
Okay, and thank you for doing this. Yeah, the world has changed as far as education from when I was a young dad and my son was in school. So many different choices we have now, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
So what kind of things did the study reveal that we can use or that parents can use regarding their children's education?
So at Connections Academy, I'll tell you a little bit about our schools, and then Amar can tell you a little bit about the study. one of the things you should know is that we bring public school to students at their home using technology. So we work together with our certified teachers and parents who are at home, like you were talking about, to support their students. And we really just ensure that students are having an engaging online experience. But unlike traditional schools, they can attend whenever and wherever they would like. So we really work to help them learn at a pace that meets their needs.
And is it a scheduled thing, or do you sign on whenever you're ready?
So I'll bring it to life for you. Imagine that you're a high school sophomore and your dream is to play collegiate soccer. And so you're going to get up in the morning, whatever time you'd like. You're going to head over to your laptop and log in. And when you do, you'll see a schedule of the lessons that you're going to complete for the day, which you can complete in the time that works for you. Maybe you do your math first. You want to get that out of the way and then do your English lessons. You know, that's up to you. And then you might have a video chat with your teacher. And then when school's over, you're going to head to soccer practice just like all the other kids in your town. So it's really a hybrid of the best of public school online learning and school at home.
And is it available if you go out of the area? Like, let's say you take a vacation to Europe, can you still do the online classes?
Yes, absolutely. And we have many students who travel with their parents for different reasons, maybe for their parents' jobs or any other opportunity, and they can absolutely continue learning wherever they are.
So there is interaction between the physical teacher and the students from time to time.
Yes, that is correct. So one of the best things about our teachers is that they are available on demand for their students. So if students are having a struggle, let's say with a math problem, they can pick up the phone and call their teacher for help right then. They can send an email. They're not constrained by the traditional school schedule, which would prevent a student from getting help when they needed it.
Right, right. And does the online class provide the same type of credits that you might need in a school?
Yes, so we are a public school, and so we follow all the same state requirements as any other public school, and our teachers are certified to teach in each state just like teachers at any other public school. We have Florida Connections Academy, and they're enrolling students right now.
Oh, wow.
For the upcoming school year.
Can students also do dual enrollment?
Yes, they can do dual enrollment.
So if, let's say, our school board district, whatever, they have certain criteria for the students, you guys would match up what you do so that it would be in compliance with what we need for our students here?
Yep, absolutely.
Wow.
Yes, we follow the same state standards that teachers are teaching across the state of Florida.
Wow. And so can you tell us a story? How long have you guys been doing this?
We've been doing this since 2001.
Oh, wow.
I have been doing this since 2009. So Connections Academy has been around for a long time.
And did you actually take classes through this?
I did not. No, I did not. I first joined as an English teacher, and then I went on to serve as assistant principal, and now I am the school principal.
Oh, okay. Oh, awesome. Do you have a story maybe of a student, maybe they were not doing as well as they could have, and this opportunity helped them out a lot? Do you have an example of somebody?
I do. I have many. It's really hard to choose because we have so many different types of kids. But one of my favorites was a third grader named Trey. He came to us, and I was reviewing his disciplinary history, and it was quite long. Frankly, it was the longest disciplinary history I'd ever seen. And I was really concerned about the fact that he was so young and was just sad. And when I met him, I really was unsure of what to expect. And he was very sweet, very polite. He seemed like a really nice kid. And what I figured out after he started at our school is that he just hadn't made a connection with a teacher. That environment just wasn't working for him. And when he came to Connections Academy, he did make that connection. And today, he's starting ninth grade.
Oh, wow.
He's a national School Society. He's one of the anchors of our TV news show. He's a model student. He's a nice guy. He has thrived because of Connections Academy, and his mom will be the first to tell you she feels like Connections Academy saved his life.
And Amar, you have a really a passion for helping students.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole company, this whole school system, we're really excited about helping students who need that greater flexibility, need that personalization. We just have research that has concluded that the students at these schools perform just as well as students at bricks and mortar schools that serve those types of students. And on top of that, they get all that flexibility that Amanda was talking about. So, we are really excited for families and students who are looking for a high quality school with that flexibility. And we really think that this could be the right option for them.
So now I mentioned at the opening that I actually am taking an online class right now. It's for art, so it's kind of one of those things I wanted to do. But I wonder. I mean, could somebody like me? I'm 63, just so you know, and I'm not going back to school at any time. Could I use your services as well?
I think it depends on the regulations in each state, but our schools traditionally serve students in grades K through 12.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, well, that's good to know. And so the website I just went to, it's connectionsacademy.com.
Yes, that is correct.
And what do we do? How do we sign up? How do we make this happen for our children?
You can go right to that website and you can click on Enroll Now, and you can get started with that quick process to get enrolled for the start of the 18-19 school year.
Is there anything we need to know regarding equipment? Do they have to have a certain type of computer?
There are some minimal requirements that are provided on the website, but it's what most kids would have in their possession today. Yeah. So we don't see a lot of struggles with that.
And Amar, how did you get all of the teachers together to get the students excited about school? I mean, you have your roots in India.
Yeah, that's right. And we typically find that students are pretty excited about school anyway. And, perhaps the traditional school wasn't working for them. And so they're really excited about trying this new thing. So many of our teachers, the teacher-student relationship is the most important part of education at Connections Academy. And we find that our teachers value that one-to-one relationship, which makes the students more excited as well. And as Amanda described, that connection Trey made with his teacher really saved his life. We find, thousands of those stories across the board.
And you also study disruption in schools. So this takes care of the bullying and things like that?
Yeah, education and technology in education is really, really ramping up. And, we know our students' lives are full of technology today. So this is really kind of keeping pace with that and using technology to address social problems like bullying, some health problems students might have, or, students are bored in class. They just want to move faster. So there's a lot of different types of students we see in our schools. And using technology, we can serve them way better than ever before.
So is there a way to counter the effects that might create? Like the ability to socialize is often argued as a reason we should have children in school. But then bullying, you say, well, maybe I'll just do homeschooling. Is there a kind of a halfway point between the two?
Well, that's a great question. We get that a lot. How are you going to make sure that virtual students socialize? And I'll tell you that they're socializing just like all the other kids in the United States through things like school clubs that we have and after-school sports and church and community groups. And they can connect in person through field trips. And, of course, they connect on using technology.
Oh, my gosh. You guys have it all figured out. Well, this is very exciting. It sounds like there's a lot more questions that we probably didn't get a chance to ask, but I would invite the listeners that are interested to do two things. Go to the website, connectionsacademy.com, and share the video that we just made of this podcast. We'll put it up on YouTube before 2 o'clock today, and you'll be able to share it from our website. Is there any other information we want to make sure the listeners have so they can look into this?
No, thank you for having us, and we're excited to share this news.
Okay, and that is the correct best website, right? Connectionsacademy.com?
You got it.
Okay. Amar, thank you for being on the air with us. Amanda, thank you for being on the air. Thank you both for what you're doing. I think you're making education better than it's ever been. I just love everything I just heard. I wish it was around when I was a kid.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you both. We'll take a break. Be right back.
Friends, countrymen, tourists, and Ocalans, lend me your ears. Hey, speaking of ears, there is an opportunity for you to help feed and provide good maintenance, housing, and medical care for Marion County's rescued big cats, bears, monkeys, and other disabled or unreleasable wild and exotic animals. Take a tour on Wednesdays or Saturdays of the Endangered Animal Rescue Sanctuary. Call 352-266-2859. The Endangered Animal Rescue Sanctuary is affectionately known as EARS. If your children can't get enough of art class, the Appleton Museum of Art has got you covered. After school and weekend art classes and one-day workshops are available for pre-K through teens, covering everything from drawing and painting to clay. Classes begin as early as September. Schedule, class descriptions, and online registration now available at appletonmuseum.org or call 352-291-4455 for more information.
Hi, Matt Wilkerson here, your Verizon representative with news that will hum your car, make it smart and safe. How? With the new Hum device by Verizon. You can rest assured you're never alone. Flat tire? Lost? Accident? For $10 a month, Hum by Verizon has you covered. And I will come to you in Marion County to install the Hum for free. Time to call me at 352-528-0020. Are you ready to hum along? Call 352-528-0020.
Hi, this is Lisa McGinnis, editor of Ocala Magazine, host of Ocala Magazine Radio. Join me every Friday at 10 a.m. when we bring the pages of Ocala Magazine to life. There's only one Ocala Magazine and only one source for local news talk radio. Tune in Friday at 10 a.m. right here on 1370 a.m. and 96.3 FM, WOCA. The Source.
All right, 14 minutes before 10 o'clock. Let's return now to the second part of a special edition of Veterans News with Hank Whittier. Hank?
We're back talking about constitutional amendments and the importance of getting out and voting and understanding these things because they affect your life. They really do. So Judge Lant is here with us and spending a lot of his personal time to help us understand these amendments. So, Judge?
So the seventh proposed amendment would be titled First Responder and Military Member Survivor Benefits, Public Colleges and Universities. I'm not sure why they're together, but this amendment basically tries to do two things. It requires a mandatory payment of death benefits and a waiver of educational expenses to qualifying survivors of certain first responders and military members who die performing official duties. So it's an attempt to compensate the families of first responders and military members, obviously, who die performing their duties. It would allow them to go to take some college-type courses without having to pay any tuition. And it would make a mandatory death benefit payment to their survivors. I don't recall whether the full thing sets out the amount of the death benefit or whether that would be set by the legislature at a later time. The other thing that this does is it would require a supermajority vote by the university trustees and the state university system board of governors to raise any fees, but only in cases where those groups are already required to approve it. So the legislature can authorize new fees, and in certain instances, when they authorize those fees, they have to be approved by the university board of governors and by the university trustees. It would require a supermajority vote by all of those in order for the increase in fees to go forward. And it would also, another thing that this amendment would do is creates the existing state college system as a constitutional entity and requires a different way for those colleges to be governed. Everyone probably recalls that a few years ago, we took what were Florida community colleges and converted them all to state colleges, which provided CFC, for example, the ability to give certain 4-year degrees. Mm-hmm. They also have the requirement in certain instances where they have to provide the $10,000 education college degree to certain individuals. So this amendment would create a new governing structure for those colleges and create them as a constitutional entity, which would make it harder to get rid of them because they would be in the Constitution. Very confusing. You really need to look at that. What we might try to do in the future is maybe go into some of these in a little bit more depth. The next one would be the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment would term limit school board members and would also operate to it would allow or require the legislature to promote civil literacy in public schools. Currently, district school boards have a constitutional duty to operate, control, and supervise all of the public schools. Those duties would remain the same, but it would permit the state to operate, control, and supervise public schools that are not established by the school board. So the state would then have the ability to open schools that would be outside of the control of the school board. Mm-hmm. And run those schools. Not exactly sure what they contemplate being able to do that, because charter schools are still within the school board's authority now. Yeah. And I believe the way this reads, they would still be that way. This would just create another way for the state to open schools. They're probably going to be funded by the same tax base and the same way that the rest of our schools are funded by. So I think what this does is it term limits the school board, and it potentially restricts the school board's ability to keep all schools on a level playing field, because they're not going to have control over certain schools. So if you think the state would be better at running some of your schools, you would vote for this. This would also term limit school board members. So if you believe in term limits, you might want to consider this amendment for that purpose. The two main purposes of this amendment are really they're not really running together. No, they're not. They're just separate issues completely.
Yeah, it would have been better had they separated those out, I would believe.
I think if they'd made that into two amendments, it would be easier to understand, and it would also be easier to make a yes-no choice on each of those. If you're for one of these and against the other one, then you got to pick. Either you're going to vote for both or vote against both.
Well, that's been the complaint of most voters, at least in the complaint that I have about most of these amendments is, you're in favor of part of it, but you're not in favor of the whole thing. And they sort of combined them into a gobbledygook of language that you have to be very careful and very much know what you're voting for, one way or the other.
And number 9 is similar in that respect. Number 9 would prohibit offshore oil and gas drilling, and it also prohibits vaping in enclosed indoor workplaces. So on the one hand, it would completely do away with the ability to drill for oil and natural gas beneath state-owned waters, which state-owned waters run from the mean high water line, which is as high as the water comes, whether it's a river or the ocean. And then they extend in the ocean, for example, to the outermost boundaries of international and or state laws regarding how much of the offshore a state owns. And you would not be able to explore or drill oil. But at the same time, you're also voting on whether or not people would be allowed to vape within enclosed indoor workplaces. Basically, they would make it illegal to vape anywhere where you cannot smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So you're voting to make vaping similar to smoking with regard to where you can do it, and you're voting on whether or not to allow oil drilling under state water.
Now draw the connection between those two, okay?
I don't think I can.
We got about 5 minutes, so we probably can do at least one more, and then we'll see if we can.
10 has to do with state and local government. It would require the legislature to retain the Department of Veterans Affairs. It would ensure that sheriffs, property appraisers, supervisors of elections, tax collectors, and clerks of court in all counties have to be elected, which is how they get selected now. There are a couple of counties where the clerk of the court, by constitution, that's an elected position, and by definition, the clerk of the court is also the comptroller for the county, which means that ultimately the clerk is in charge of or oversees all of the county's collection and expenditure of monies. For example, the property appraiser determines how much your property is worth. The tax collector collects the taxes that you pay on your property. And then the clerk of the court, in his capacity as the comptroller, oversees the expenditure of those monies, does the auditing and things like that. There are a couple of counties where the clerks have given up being the comptroller, but they're still elected clerks. And this constitutional amendment would make sure that those never became appointed positions.
Okay.
It also would make the legislative sessions longer in even numbered years. They'd start in January instead of starting in March, and it does away with the legislature's ability to change that date. It would be set in the Constitution, and the legislatures would no longer have the right to decide when they're going to meet. And then it would also create an Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism within the Department of Law Enforcement. I don't really recall why the committee decided that needed to be a separate constitutional created office. The department is the Department of Law Enforcement does that now. They coordinate that now. I know they work with sheriff's offices and police departments. So this would create another department within the Department of Law Enforcement to do that. So once again, you're voting to make sure that there's always a Department of Veterans Affairs. You're voting to make sure that sheriffs and other constitutional officers are always elected. You're voting to change when the legislature meets, and you are voting to create this counterterrorism department within the Department of Law Enforcement, if you vote for that.
Larry, you've got a 10 o'clock group coming in, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we'll do, Judge, and I really appreciate your time. I hate to keep on asking you to come back and explain things, but we'll take a look at your schedule maybe, and we'll take a look at when you can come back on. I want voters to be well informed, to get out and vote and understand these amendments, because they remind me sort of when I first learned to do laundry. I would put everything in together and the colors would run.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of these constitutional amendments are. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And sometimes at the end result, what you got is colors that run, and this is a lot of it's very confusing. So while I support a lot of the things and like some of them, the language is confusing. So I appreciate you coming in, Judge Lant, and again, all the other things you do for this community and the veterans. But maybe we can get you to come back in, before the election, so we can explain all these things away. As I always do every week, I want to thank you for your service, and God bless America, everybody.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. Stocks opening lower on Wall Street on worries of a trade war with China.
The top trade rep, Bob Lighthizer, yesterday announcing that as it relates to the next tranche of potential tariffs, some $200 billion worth, he's been instructed to look at whether or not that should be increased to 25%. Remember, the initial proposal here was 10%.
Fox's Blake Berman reports sources tell Fox